The purpose of the Spotlight program is to take one of our illustrious members and shine the spotlight on his entire life. And I think you'll agree with me that I've chosen a very fascinating individual in the person of our music man, Davis Bingham. So without further ado, let me say, Davis, hello.
Stan, and hello, everybody.
Nice to have you with us, Davis. We're going to take that fascinating journey through your fascinating life. Let's begin by talking about your childhood, and we have that on the screen, which I have. Tell us about your earliest years in Delano.
I was born in Delano, Tennessee, which was a little village with a commissary, a Baptist church, and a cotton mill. My father was manager of the commissary, and our family had living quarters above the store. And that's where I was born on April 18, 1930.
And here we see you sitting on a bench at the age of 6 with your sister, who is 2 years younger, right?
Actually, she's 2 years old, and she now lives in Hartsville, South Carolina.
So there's a 4-year difference between you and
yes.
she. Okay. Now we take you to a very important place where you spent 8 years, the Pleasant Ridge Elementary School. Describe those 8 years, if you will.
Pleasant Ridge was a 2-room school. We had no running water. We had 2 outhouses in the back of the campus. And I went to the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in the same room with the same teacher. It was a wonderful experience. She was a wonderful teacher.
Very good. You certainly had a long relationship in order to make that evaluation. And looking back, it's usually a very accurate one, Davis. Let's go on to the ages of 11 and 14.
Yes, I was in the 5th grade. And the picture on the right, I made in the bus station at one of those little cubicles where you put a quarter in and got a picture or two. And I was on my way to my freshman year at Washington College Academy.
That was the one on the right. You left your elementary school, grade 8, graduation, going to high school, Washington College Academy. Here's your student union. You don't have to go through the interior if you don't mind, Davis. Tell us about the Salem Presbyterian Church on campus.
The Salem Presbyterian Church was chartered in 1780. The brick in that church was fired on site. And it's at that church that I first heard the great hymns of the church and the anthems. And we did Messiah the first year I was there, and I was just enthralled with the music. And that was really the beginning of my musical life. The student union also had the girls' dormitory on the 2nd and 3rd floors, and the cafeteria was on the 1st floor. And during the Civil War, the Yankees stabled their horses in the cafeteria.
I hope the odor left by the time you got there. Anyway, Davis, here you are now in Washington College Academy. We're going to take a look at you with a basketball delicately balanced in your right hand. And then we move over to your high school graduation book. And there is your picture. And I'd like to read the awards given to you by your fellow students. Very significant. best all-around boy, most athletic boy, best personality, Mr. Washington College, most poetical boy, most musical boy. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 coveted awards. And did you leave any for any of your peers?
I don't know how that happened, Stan. I have no idea.
Well, it's always good, Davis, when you're on the stand to take the picture. I refuse to answer. From your Washington College Academy, you then entered the University of Chattanooga in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and we take you to your senior year where you really began to impose your musical talents and presence on the school. And here is a picture of dashing you in a duel, a fencing duel, inside the opera Don Giovanni.
Well, in the opera, the commandant and Don Giovanni have a duel. I'm defending the virtue of my daughter. And during the duel, Norman Scott's tip of his foil fell off. And we had not practiced very much, and so we got mixed up, and he lunged when he should have parried, and he lunged and buried his foil in my right thigh. Of course, in the opera, I lie down and die and sing my death song. And after the scene, the officials at the opera rushed me to the hospital, which was down the street about 6 blocks, and they cleansed the wound and gave me a tetanus shot. They hurried me back to the opera, and I returned in the final scene as a ghost, as a statue, a singing statue, and that concluded the opera.
So you were wounded in action without benefit of a Broadway Purple Heart. Let's take a look at this picture. You have the world-renowned operatic star Lawrence Melchior hugging and embracing your vocal teacher, Emmy Land, whose husband was your opera coach. Tell us about Emmy Land.
Well, Emmy was an international star in Europe. She sang with Geely and all the greats of that era. And as you say, they immigrated here in 1938, fleeing the Nazis, and Walter Damrosch, who was conductor at the Philharmonic in New York, was their sponsor. So that's how they got to the United States. And then they came south and started an opera company in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
We now take you to the picture of Davis conducting his first choir at the First Baptist Church. So give us a quick rundown. This is you in your junior year, Davis, on the bottom left. And here you are at a church that you're going to be spending a lot more time in.
This was my first choir. And here we see both the adults and the children. And I was 20 years old. And my mother and dad, who were both staunch Baptists, had told me that their greatest goal for me would be for me to be the minister of music in a big Baptist church. And here I was, a junior in college, and already fulfilled the goal.
They must have been beaming, popping their buttons.
They were very happy.
On the left of the screen is that picture of the First Baptist Church,
Which was built in 1885.
Here we go to the Davis Bingham in tails, looking very handsome. Tell us the occasion, Davis.
This was backstage prior to my stepping out on the stage to perform my senior recital.
And is this the time when you won a state gold medal for having the best voice in the state?
No, that had occurred in my senior year at Washington College Academy, and it was a competition sponsored by the National Federation of Music Club.
Quite an achievement, national, very good. So you go now from this lovely looking uniform of tails, and you're drafted into the United States Army in 1950, late 52. So you get there in 1953, and you are placed in the office of the commanding general, General Maxwell D. Taylor, and you had the responsibilities given to that lieutenant in that you had to keep the personnel records of 300 officers.
I could type, and I was a college graduate when I was drafted. So when I was shipped to Korea, they had the record of that, and they signed me to a first lieutenant's job to maintain the personnel records of all general officers, which were about 50, and all full colonels, which was about 250 in Korea. And I had to prepare a report every day for the general as to the well-being of all of these officers in Korea. So I had a sort of an in with the general's office. And I went to chapel, in headquarters chapel, and they had a choir of about 6. And the director of that group went home, back to the States. So I volunteered to take it over. And the chaplain, who was the Army chaplain, agreed to give me a try. So I asked Major Pake, who was General Taylor's aide, if the general would sign a letter for me. And he said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I would like to organize the 8th Army Choir." Now, I'm standing in Maxwell Taylor's office, outer office, and with no stripe. And Major Pake looked at me and just bellowed. And he said, "Are you kidding?" I said, "No, I'm not." He said, "Well, you write the letter and I will see if the general will sign it." So I wrote the letter inviting all officers and enlisted men to auditions. And the letter was signed by the general. So I went to the machine records unit and got them to kick out all of the forms that indicated that persons in 8th Army headquarters who had either music as a vocation or avocation. And so there were about 200 and some. We had about 150 show up for the auditions. I chose 36, and we practiced every night for 2 weeks. I asked the chaplain if he could just let us have a couple of weeks to get ready. So I rehearsed these men, which were a combination of officers and enlisted men, and we sang in 2 weeks. So on that particular Sunday, that first Sunday we sang, we we sang Chesnikoff's Salvation is Created, which was a Russian composer, and we were at the time at war with the communists in North China. And I had asked Major Pate to get General Taylor's favorite hymn. So his favorite hymn was, O land of rest, for thee I sigh. When will the moment come when I can lay my armor by and rest in peace at home? So I arranged that for 8-part men's voices, and we sang that in that service. It was a beautiful, beautiful performance. And if I do say, they don't have a finer choral group in Washington, D.C. than that group we had in South Korea in 1953. After the service, General Taylor, as he was exiting, sent for me to come down and speak with him. And he looked me straight in the eye and he said, Private Bingham, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember the exact words, but he said, this has been the most profound spiritual experience I've ever had, and I want to thank you. And he said, if you need anything for this group, you just let us know. And from then on, Stan, it was smooth sailing.
And from then on, Davis, you learned of a heavy-duty competition of every military choir in the South Asia area, and you chose to enter your 8th Army Choir, and you still had to pare it down to 14 singers, yourself, the conductor, and a pianist, and 16 of you went to the Ernie Pyle Theater in Tokyo, shown on the left, and you competed in that competition. You won that competition. Your choir won.
Now this gentleman in the middle of the first row, full colonel on the general staff, he really was behind our choir.
Colonel Cooper calls General Taylor to tell him about the victory.
Well, we were billeted in the Yakima Hotel, and the general instructed Colonel Cooper to move us over to the old Imperial Hotel, which was the finest hotel in Tokyo at that time. It was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright.
And you had a 3-day stay there with alleged off-duty conditions and rewards for the victory. So you really spent several days in, quote, luxury, courtesy of your victory in this elite competition. So congratulations on that score. Now let's move along, Davis, to the Operation Little Switch.
Operation Little Switch was when the combatants exchanged prisoners. We were during the armistice ceasefire. We were exchanging during Little Switch the sick and wounded, and and there were about 149 Americans who were exchanged at that time.
Okay, and then you moved over, and by the way, on the picture you see a walkway.
Freedom Road from North Korea, their side, over into our side.
38th parallel, right here, in Panmunjom, the armistice area. Okay, we now go over to Big Switch, which involved more numbers, and if you notice, there are many more ambulances. And
there were about 6,000 Americans exchanged. There's some 22,000 North Koreans and Chinese communists. And during that exchange, there were a number of Americans who had been brainwashed and were reluctant to come home. So General Taylor sent our choir up there along with risers and Klieg lights to sing Christmas carols over into the North Korean compound, hoping to touch the heartstrings of those who were reluctant and to get them to come home. They did all come home except 21, and they remained in. And an interesting sidelight, the North Koreans sent the privates, the corporals, the sergeants, the lieutenants, sent in reverse order. So the last soldier to come across was Major William Dean. And General Dean made a point to let us know that those guys who had shown a reluctance to come home had been brainwashed and they didn't deserve to be put down because they had, the conditions were so severe that you'd do anything practically to get something to eat.
In other words, General Taylor weaponized your corral to make it a potent weapon against the brainwashing efforts of the North Koreans. And you did splendidly, so well, Davis, that they now in 1954, you were due to be discharged, sent home as per your 2-year term of service, and they threw you a farewell party. And General Taylor awarded you the United States Army Commendation Medal, and he awarded you that article, and it says, that medal, it says, for exemplary service over and above assigned duty. So that is extremely meritorious and commendable. He also gave you a personal gift of a wristwatch inscribed by him. Tell us about that wristwatch, if you will.
Well, the watch, of course, brought it home. And when we were living in Charlotte, a thief broke into our home and stole that watch off of the cabinet in our bedroom. And so I don't have it anymore. But at that party General Taylor had just had a staff meeting, and he brought Major General Paul Harkins and Brigadier General William Westmoreland, and then Colonel Creighton Abrams to the party, but they were often at the chapel when we sang. So I thought that was pretty nifty.
You leave the Army in 1954, and you begin your attendance at the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in order to earn a master's degree in sacred music. At the same time, you were doing, the Southern Baptist Seminary was located in Louisville, Kentucky. So obviously with your gifted talents, you began to sing for the Kentucky Opera Association, supported by the Louisville Symphony Orchestra. But at the same time, you received a full-time job back in your first Baptist church, which was in Chattanooga, and you began, as this newspaper article on the left of the screen says, you began a 7-day-a-week full-time, 2 full-time jobs, and you had to make a round-trip air flight 300 miles between Louisville, Kentucky, and Chattanooga, Tennessee. So here we go. Here is why Davis Bingham has such a busy life. On weekends, he trains 5 choirs at the First Baptist Church here in Chattanooga and provides music for 2 additional worship services each Sunday. During the week, he takes a full schedule of courses leading to the Master of Sacred Music degree in Louisville, Kentucky at the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. And he has full-time work in both areas. He had 5 choirs in Chattanooga in the First Baptist Church, and then he comes home to a full load of studies. In his spare time, Davis, who has a fine bass voice, has found opportunity to sing. Recently, he did the role of Bartolo in Figaro with the Kentucky Opera Company, a part which he did with the Chattanooga Company a few years ago. One of his most interesting extra performances was recording this past month for Columbia Masterworks, the first performance of a new composition, 4 strict songs for 8 baritones. In other words, this man's talents were now in full demand, and he had them running in 2 places at once. So that is quite a retrospective, Davis. After achieving your master's in sacred music, you enroll in the George Peabody College of Vanderbilt University in 1957, seeking your doctoral studies in sacred music or music education. And you taught what?
Well, I taught private voice while I was a graduate student there. And then I sang a couple of operas at the same time during that year.
You seek and earn a job, a professorial job, as Associate Professor of Music at the University of Louisiana in Monroe, Louisiana.
Well, I was offered a job for the spring semester only. My predecessor at the college left right after Christmas, so they were in a lurch. They offered me the job for the spring semester, and I said, impossible. I mean, I can't move for just a spring. If you'll throw in the summer, I'll take it, which they agreed to do. And that summer stretched into nearly 10 years, a little over 10 years.
You also did side work in 2 religious temples. The first one being the First Presbyterian Church of Monroe, director of music. And I think you were going to point out the beauty of that organ as shown on the wall.
Yes, it was a marvelous instrument. And I had the privilege of overseeing its installation as minister of music.
And then you became, as a cantorial soloist in Temple B'nai Israel. Tell us how that came about.
I was a member of the Rotary Club, as was the rabbi of Temple B'nai Israel. And during our play, we had a tournament, and we were partners. As we were during the play, he sidled over to me and said, "You know, I've lost my soloist at the temple." I said, "I'm sorry to hear that." He said, "Well, I think I've found one." I said, "Who might it be?" He said, "You." I said, "Rabbi, do you understand that my father was a country Baptist preacher? That am a Presbyterian. And he said, no, but I can teach you. So that was how it got started. We worked together. He was a fine man, and I loved singing in the temple.
And they loved you too, Davis. Your efforts were most appreciated. And now your career takes a weird turn. You leave the professorial life, you leave the music per se, and you sign on as the executive assistant to the mayor of Monroe in 1967. And here is a picture of their beautiful city hall. How did that come about?
Well, I had served on the building committee for the Civic Center complex, which was the crown jewel of the mayor's run as mayor. And so I got to know him pretty well there. And so he offered me the opportunity to come as his executive assistant. And I thought about it, and the mayor owned 100 discount stores, similar to Walmart's. And he owned a Jet Commander airplane and a King Air and a Queen Air. So I was taken with this successful man, and I thought I ought to hitch my wagon to his star.
He gives you the opportunity to be the director of the Crown Jewel in Monroe, their civic center, which you would be there for 4 years, and the Monroe Civic Center, under the leadership of Davis Bingham, became one of the major show-stopping places in the country. Big shows such as Holiday on Ice, Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus, the Harlem Globetrotters, and the most popular bands in the country came calling as well. Some of them were Three Dog Night, Chicago, The Who, Kiss. Individual vocal artists were Conway Twitty, The Carpenters, Gladys Knight and the Pips, Dolly Parton, Billy Joel, and Bruce Springsteen. Jerry Lee Lewis.
Well, Jerry was playing in our arena. The arena was packed, and the excitement was at a high level. And Jerry reached down during his performance while he was playing great balls of fire, and he gets a can of cigarette lighter fluid and squirts it on the piano lid. Then he gets a match and throws it on the cigarette lighter fluid. Of course, it explodes into a horrendous flame. The audience goes wild. The fire marshal has a heart attack, and Davis Bingham has a heart attack too. But the fire was immediately extinguished, and the audience settled down, and it was an exciting incident, to say the least. After the performance, I held out $5,000. I think it would be at least $10,000 today for that piano lid. It didn't cost quite that much to get it fixed, but kept the balance.
And he had no opposition to...
Oh, they didn't. They must have done it everywhere.
Now we come over to one of your favorite people in showbiz, and that is Loretta Lynn, if you will.
Loretta played our building 3 times, and she was a beautiful person, inside and out, kind, thoughtful. And I'd assigned one of our assistant managers to take care of her when she was playing our building. So it developed that the assistant manager's father had to have a kidney transplant and with no insurance. So Loretta came over to our office and she said, I would like to do a concert and all of the proceeds go to Neil's father for his operation. And we got down, looked at what we called our Bible, which was the calendar, found a date, and she called Conway Twitty on my phone. We didn't have cell phones back then. And Conway asked her, she tells him what she would like to do. Then he asked her, what was the date? She said, told him. And I heard him yell on the phone and said, Loretta, that's Saturday night. That's our big night. And she said, Conway, she said this very calmly, Conway, you owe me. And they came and played the concert and proceeds paid for the kidney transplant. Yeah, $70,000, which now would probably be $500,000.
And your concert garnered more than that sum, enabling your assistant manager to finance his father-in-law's life or death kidney transplant. We're saving Elvis for last, and you had Elvis play your arena some 3 times during your tenure there. Tell us a bit what kind of a guy he was.
Elvis was he could be uptight, and he could be very, very calm. My experience with him was a nice guy. He called me sir. Yes, sir. No, sir. He was a child of the South. And, we never sold a ticket across the counter. They were all by mail.
Meaning they sold out
sold out. Oh, of course.
He was going to appear. They didn't wait for anything other than mailing in their bids right away. Okay, so you end your stay as manager of the Civic Arena because your benefactor, Mayor Howard, loses his bid for re-election in 1972, and he and all of his entourage are out of a job. So you turn, Davis, to the business world, and you become an independent manufacturer's representative, repping and selling items such as Hitachi, which was very popular in the country then, Atari, which also was very popular, and finally Columbia Label Records. So off you went as a traveling salesman with the wonderful territory of Texas and Oklahoma. Davis came into a large store in Texas, hopefully getting him as one of his customers. The owner of that store, a Jewish chap, looked like Mr. Peepers. And he was very skeptical about Davis until Davis said, I am a solo cantor as well as not being Jewish. And the guy did not believe him. And he asked Davis to sing some of the Erev Shabbat songs, the Friday night service songs, and the Shabbat songs of Shabbat Saturday. And Davis did that so well, 3 songs. The guy said, stay right there, don't move. And he ran out of his store, up and down the block, and he brought back 12 Jewish men. And he said to Davis, let's do an Erev Shabbat service, which Davis did so well that these men began to cry. And Davis, in his wonderful humanity, refused to take advantage of them getting orders from them at that time. And he simply packed his bags and left the store. Several days later, he was in another hotel in Laredo, Texas, when he gets a call from Mr. Peepers and says, "You went out of the store. I don't even know the products you sell." And Davis had to tell him what he sold, and the man and some of his colleagues made very big orders for Davis, as he did well the right thing by all of them. Now we come over to the person on the right of your screen, and Davis, take over, please.
When I was in Houston, I stayed at the Shamrock Hotel. Shamrock was a famous hotel in those days, and it was really coming down to the end of its run. But it was bought by Hilton, and it became the Shamrock Hilton. And between the Shamrock and the Houston Hospital complex on South Main was a piano bar. And occasionally I would stop in the piano bar and sing along with the pianist. Well, this particular time I was there, this gentleman with a high forehead and big rimmed glasses showed up, came up to the piano and said, "Could you sing the Lord's Prayer? You have a voice that just fits that song." And I said, "Sir," thinking this is a bar. And he said, "I really would like to hear you sing that." So I turned to the pianist and I said, "Can you play?" He said, "I can play it." Well, I said, "I can sing it." So the gentleman placed a $20 bill in the pianist's jar, and we sang the Lord's Prayer. And at the end, I sort of stretched it out, and held the notes for a long time. And so when we got through, all of the tinkling had stopped in the bar. No talking, no nothing. It was quiet as church, or we might say synagogue. And it remained that way for 5-10 seconds, which when you're waiting like that, it seems like a long time. And then it just erupted into prolonged applause. When it died down, the pianist turned to me and he said, "Do you know who that gentleman was?" I said, "I have no idea." He said it was Dr. Michael DeBakey. Stan, you tell him who Michael DeBakey was.
Remember the year. Michael DeBakey and Christian Bernard were the two surgeons on the international scene who invented the first successfully implanted artificial heart. They started successful implants of artificial hearts in people who otherwise would have died without them. Davis, we now come to the best decision you ever made in your life. You moved from, wanted to get back into teaching, and you moved to Charlotte, where you met a very delightful and beautiful young lady. The floor is yours.
Well, Joan and I had businesses in Charlotte at that time, and we often frequented the same coffee bar. And I had noticed her on several occasions and was intrigued by her beauty. And one day, it so happened that we were at the coffee bar And we happened to be the only two in the bar. So I said, could we share a table? And she agreed to do that. And I fell in love at that very moment. My heart began to beat, and I out of my chest. And so I said, could I take you to dinner? And she said, I'm busy. I said, well, how about tomorrow night? She said, I have choir practice. Oh, you do? So I said, where do you have choir practice? She said, Sharon Presbyterian Church. So what do I do? But Thursday night, I go to choir practice at Sharon Presbyterian Church, volunteer to sing in the choir. and the director was more than pleased to have me join the bass section. And the director asked me, could you sing this Sunday with our choir? And I said, surely. So they give me my own choir robe and music folder, and I sang with the choir the next Sunday. And I prevailed on Joan to go to Sunday dinner with her. And she sort of reluctantly said, okay. And we did go to dinner, and that's how we got started. We were married on December 23rd, 1977 in Hartsville, South Carolina, the First Baptist Church. My minister father performed the ceremony, and it's been a beautiful, beautiful life ever since. It was the best decision that I ever made. I'm just happy that we're here together.
Excellent ending. It is a story worth telling. Now you get a position in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, and you were in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools from 77 to 16 years later, 1993. And you taught middle school music. And as an educator, I know that middle school is probably the toughest range of students one can teach, because their attention span is probably the least and the worst. But evidently, Davis, you were an outstanding teacher. Faculty normally are the selectors of the award each year for Teacher of the Year in their particular school district. And you earned that honor not once, but twice. So that is, again, another reflection of the quality of your work as it deals with teaching and all forms of choral work. Now tell us about a significant change in your status in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg School District when you took a car ride with the superintendent of schools.
I was appointed to what was called the 2000 Commission by Governor Jim Martin. And that commission's assignment was to prepare the state for the new millennium. And it just so happened that the new superintendent of schools for Charlotte-Mecklenburg, John Murphy, was also appointed to that commission. And we had a meeting of the commission at the governor's mansion in Raleigh. And after the meeting, John Murphy asked if he could ride back to Charlotte with me. I said, of course. So during the ride back, we bonded. And 5 days later, by the way, on the way back, he said, could you stop off at my house? We could continue talking about this. So we tossed around ideas for another hour or so. Then 5 days later, my principal came into my room and said, Superintendent Murphy wants to see you this afternoon. And I said, really? So I went down that afternoon, and when I left Dr. Murphy's office that afternoon, I was director of career development for the system, which has 5,000 teachers and 1,800 administrators. I was a director of the career development program and the Metroline Education Consortium, and the superintendent's liaison to professional staff. So that was quite a quick switch. Talking about little switch and big switch, this was a quick switch.
And I'm sure you did well. And during that time, you were minister of music at the Westminster Presbyterian Church.
Well, Joan said, not long after we married, she said, why don't you go and finish your doctorate, which I had abandoned years before. And I said, I've been on the campus in 10 years, and no, it's not possible. She said, you don't know if it's possible until you try. I said, I know something about education, Joan. She said, you don't know. She said, you're going to be at the Music Educators National Conference convention in Nashville. You're going over there. So why don't you just go on out to Peabody and talk to them and see what you can do? So I went to the convention, and I knew that I better go out to Peabody, do what was my assignment, or I would be in trouble when I got home. So I went out to Peabody, and lo and behold, they put my program back on track and said, if you will just come back and spend the summer on campus taking these 2 courses, we'll put your program right back on track, which we did. And make a long story short, that was in 1978 or 79, and I got the degree in 1983.
Congratulations, Dr. Bingham. I'm going to run this through, if I may, Davis. You again are a member of the 2000 Commission. You were called unexpectedly and surprisingly to the White House to appear with President Bush. And you go into the outer office and you're asked to wait. And in the door walks Charlton Heston and his wife, Lydia.
The President Bush and Marlon Fitzwater, his press secretary, came into the West Wing waiting room, and we had a quick cup of coffee out to the Rose Garden to witness the signing of an executive order. And they placed me between Charlton Heston and Governor Florio on the front row. So it was quite an interesting incident experience.
And then later on, you earned the Order of Longleaf Pine, and that also had to do with the 2000 Commission for your dedicated work in that regard.
Yes, that was by Jim Martin, Governor Martin.
So then in 1993, you retire from the Charlotte Mecklenburg schools, and you are free as a bird. And one of the things you and Joan do soon thereafter is to go cross-country 81 days. And one of the stops you insisted on making was in Plains, Georgia. Tell us about your meetup with former President Jimmy Carter and his wife, Rosalind?
Well, we went to church at Maranatha Baptist Church, and President Carter taught the Sunday school class. And he was a wonderful teacher. He reviewed last Sunday's lesson, taught this Sunday, and then previewed following Sunday's lesson. He was a great teacher. Then after we stayed for church, and after church we got to take a picture with the president and first lady.
You and Joan decide to move into a fabulous community, Hilton Head Island, South Carolina, from 1994 to 2003, and you immediately make your mark on temples in choral music. You became director of music at the First Presbyterian Church, elected as their ruling elder in 1997, and again you delve into Judaism by becoming their cantorial soloist at the congregation Beth Yam. And Hilton Head, you received an honorary doctoral degree from Washington College in 1998, recognition of past national effort in support of public education. And also at Hilton Head is a mecca of tennis. Hilton Head is known for its tennis, which is one of your major avocations, and you enjoyed your tennis. But as you were about to leave, there was a newspaper article, a letter. I'd like to read excerpts from it very quickly. Davis Bingham makes a difference. On occasion, I am greatly moved by the amazing manifestation of talent on this island, and we have just had one major example. Few, if any, musical events are so popular that they fill or nearly fill the copious First Presbyterian Church sanctuary 3 times, as did the Hilton Head Chorale this past weekend of October 17, 18. The major credit must go to the chorale's founder and director, Davis Bingham. These performances would not have been. Davis is not only a renowned baritone performer with considerable operatic and concert experience, but also a fine teacher and administrator. Davis Bingham surely ranks high on any list of island people who make a difference by sharing their exceptional talents with us. That, I think, sums you up very, very succinctly, Davis, and very accurately. And we're looking at the Davis Bingham Chorale. And if you're looking for his beautiful wife, she is right behind Davis.
Yes, she's singing tenor. She's sitting with the men, and she had a beautiful tux.
So Davis, take us through your 4 lovely children, if you will.
Oh, on the left there is Rebecca. Rebecca is a travel journalist and lives in Hot Springs, Arkansas. However, she's not been traveling much lately. And with her is Teresa. Teresa is an executive with Equifax in Atlanta.
And no matter how old they get, the caption reads, no matter how old we get, we're still daddies, little girls at heart.
And that's exactly right.
And
here I am with Stan, our son, who lives in Dallas. He's a vice president with an insurance company there. And on the right is our son, Blair, who is a chief executive officer, a chief financial officer of a company in Montgomery with his wife, beautiful wife, Leslie.
The Binghams moved to Chapel Hill, not in 2004, but in 2003. And sooner than later, but Davis does his bang-up job in the Mount Carmel Baptist Church. There, Davis, having talent and skill in the field of tennis, entered the senior men's tennis singles tournament in the 80s level in 2013 and made the finals.
Well, I had to give up tennis in 2013 when I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma. So I cried about that for 2 years because both Joan and I love the tennis world.
That you received that tough diagnosis in 2013. Here you are, 2020, spreading the wealth of your persona with all of us. And obviously, we are certainly in your corner in that tough fight. Some of our audience here today, looking at yourselves in the past several years as important members of the Cedars Singers. Bonnie, there you are. Joan, there you are. And certainly you guys have had a memorable career, if you will, a memorable period of time enjoying the talents of this man. And look at one of Davis's open the day pursuits is in the pool room with a fabulous group of people they've kiddingly named Deep Pockets. That picture was on the cover of the Meadowmont magazine about a year or so ago. Davis, obviously, in one of his favorite poses of relaxation, which he doesn't get too much at that time.
I was pleased and happy and honored to have been chosen to conduct the 54th annual Messiah Open Sing this past Christmas at the Holy Lutheran Church, Holy Trinity Lutheran Church on St. Mary's. And the picture on the at bottom left is our choir at Mount Carmel Church, which was then a church of about 200 members. I don't know what it is now, but that was quite a choir for such a small church. And they were really good.
And you were the magnet. You certainly have a way of magnetizing people into Carl's singing, and the results are always the best.
I would like to add one thing before we go. None of all of this that we've looked at since 1977 would have been possible without my Joan. And I give her all the credit, but she deserves it.
Well, last April, Davis celebrated his 90th birthday, and given the isolation we are compelled to stay at, the Cedars Singers pulled out their artistic talents and drew him a sidewalk birthday card, which, if you can see the hearts on either side and the balloons on either side, and happy 90th birthday, the illustrious life and legacy of our Renaissance man, Dr. Davis Bingham.